I'm now proud to introduce the panelists that will be leading the training tonight. Tonight we have the Honorable Judge Dean Hansel, Lana Choi, and Amanda Wong. Judge Dean Hansel, he's a highly respected member of the California Superior Court of Los Angeles County. Appointed by Governor Jerry Brown in 2016, he is a long-cause judge in family law. Before his judicial career, Judge Hansel was a partner at Hogan, Lovell, and Dewey and LeBouf. He has an impressive history of civic engagement, having served as a police commissioner for the City of Los Angeles, the chair of the Fire and Police Pension Board, and chair of the Cable Television Commission. He was also the chair of the Sheriff's Civilian Oversight Commission working group for the County of Los Angeles. Judge Hansel has been involved in various community organizations and initiatives, including serving as co-chair of the Los Angeles LGBT Center and co-chair of the Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation, and the chair of the Antitrust Section for the LA County Bar Association. Lana Choi. Lana Choi is a senior deputy county counsel at the Los Angeles office of the county council. She leads the county council gun safety team and gun violence restraining order team, and she serves as the legal advisor for the LA County Sheriff's Department. Lana is a graduate of Williams College and Columbia University School of Law. Amanda Wong is a deputy city attorney for the Public Safety General Counsel Division of Los Angeles City Attorney's Office. She represents the Los Angeles Police Department in petitioning for gun violence restraining orders against individuals who pose a risk of harm to themselves from firearms. Prior to serving as counsel for the department, Amanda was a prosecutor in the gang and gun prosecution section, where she vertically prosecuted the firearms and gang-related misdemeanors. As the gun violence prevention coordinator for the Los Angeles City Attorney's Office, she advised on state, federal, and local firearm legislation, helped develop strategies and initiatives to reduce gun violence, and oversaw the domestic violence firearm relinquishment program. Prior to joining the city attorney's office, she served as deputy city prosecutor for the city of Redondo Beach and was in civil practice at Kirkland and Ellis. Amanda graduated from UCLA School of Law, where she served on the law review. Thank you very much for coming today.
好，那我们今天呢，主要有3位的嘉宾出席我们今天的讲座。那第一位呢，是我们尊敬的法官，他的名字叫 Hansel 法官，他是洛杉矶县的高等法院备受尊敬的法官。他于在2016年由州长这个布朗呢任命作为家事法庭方面的长期法官。第2位呢，嘉宾呢是蔡律师Lana Choi。Lana Choi 呢，他是洛杉矶法律顾问办公室的高级县的法律顾问，他领导的县法律顾问的枪支安全小组和枪支暴力限制令小组，并担任洛杉矶县的治安部门的法律顾问。那第3位嘉宾呢是 Amanda Wong， 王律师呢，他是洛杉矶市的检察办公室的公共安全总法律顾问和副市长的副市检察官，他代表洛杉矶警察局，针对那些对自己或者枪支会造成伤害的个人，申请呢枪支暴力的限制令。所以呢，今天会由他主讲有关我们这个枪支暴力禁制令的申请的主要的一些议题。Thank you.
Thank you. I will now turn it over to the panelists, and just to remind them that it is interpreted and it'll be consecutive. So I thank you for your patience. We will get through this, and you will be learning quite a bit and hopefully sharing this with your community. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amy. As Amy said, my name is Lana Choi, and I'm a Senior Deputy County Counsel at the Office of County Counsel. I work with the LA County Sheriff's Department. I'm very happy to be here tonight. One quick disclaimer before I get started. I am appearing here in my personal capacity, so that any opinions that I may express tonight are not necessarily those of the Office of County Counsel, the LA County Sheriff's Department, or LA County.
好，那我们今天呢，刚才这位是 Lana 呢，她是洛杉矶法律顾问办公室的高级副县的法律顾问。那她今天会就有关枪械这个暴力禁制令方面的一些问题呢，会跟大家做一个简单的介绍。
So just to jump into things, we're here tonight to discuss gun violence restraining orders, also known as GVROs. These type of laws are generally also referred to as red flag laws. That's because they are kind of based in this notion that there are always red flags. There are always warning signs to gun violence. I don't think that any mass shooting has happened where afterwards people are like, I never saw that coming. We never saw that coming. There were no signs. Or if someone dies by suicide, family members and friends literally had no idea where that came from. And so this GVRO law is based on the public and law enforcement recognizing those warning signs and red flags and taking legal action to at least remove firearms from those people. And I think that the name gun violence restraining order is very accurate. That's the name of California's laws because it is based solely on the person's possession of guns.
我们今天要谈论的叫做枪支的暴力限制令这个呢简称叫做 GVRO， 在英文里面也可以简称叫做枪械的禁制令。那因为在枪械在犯案的过程中呢，他们都会无论是自杀也好，发生这个严重的枪击案也好，他们在事发之前呢总是有一些症状的，所以呢我们可以通过一些症状呢，如果一旦发现这种症状的话呢，可以通过申请这种禁制令呢，去保护他人的安全。
California first enacted the GVRO law in 2016. And what's really important to remember is that the law is in the penal code, which usually contains criminal laws. But please remember that it is a civil, not a criminal order. It is a civil remedy. And so for especially you members of the public who are here and may be asking questions or may be hesitant to act in a situation to get a gun violence restraining order on a loved one, a family member, a friend, a work colleague, because you don't want to get them in trouble, you don't want to get them involved in the criminal justice system, GVROs don't do that. It is purely civil. It doesn't involve a criminal charge, there's no criminal penalty involved, and it doesn't go on their criminal record.
那这个枪械的禁制令呢，是在2016年开始实施的。在这个禁制令的申请呢，其实可能有很多人误以为它是跟刑事的这个法条有关，但事实上呢，它是作为民事法案里面的一个条款做申请的，它并非刑事案件，所以呢，它也暂时不牵涉到任何之前的这个刑事犯罪。Please continue.
So a GVRO allows law enforcement and certain members of the public to take action to prevent a person who poses a significant risk of harming themselves or others from possessing or purchasing a gun or ammunition for a certain amount of time. And that could be anywhere from 21 days to 5 years. And that's done by court order. Again, a civil court, not a criminal court. The court orders the person to give any of their guns or ammunition that they have in their possession to the police for safekeeping, or to turn it over to a licensed firearms dealer for safekeeping, or allows the police to go to that person and actually take their guns away. Also, the person cannot buy a gun or ammunition because that prohibition will show up when they go to a gun dealer and they run the background check. So this is another thing that's important to remember. Even if a person doesn't have guns or you don't think they have guns, it's worth getting the GVRO anyway if you think that there is a possibility of them harming themselves or others, because it prevents them from going out and actually purchasing a gun. So a GVRO, at the end of the day, it keeps guns away from a person who may use that gun to harm themselves or others.
那在这个枪支的禁制令呢，如果是申请的话呢，它的具体的程序呢，就是由在申请完以后呢，允许执法部门和某些公众呢采取行动，防止呢有严重伤害自己或他人风险的人在一定时间内呢拥有或者购买枪支和弹药。这个时间呢可以是21天到5年之间。这个呢再说一次，是透过法庭的这个命令叫做禁制令完成的，是属于民事法庭。而且呢，在这个法院命令下来以后呢，警察呢可以要求这个该人呢交出这个枪支和弹药，或者呢由警察呢进行没收枪支和弹药，以及是防止他进一步购买枪支和弹药，这些都是允许的。
At the front of the room, I think you may have seen this flyer, this double-sided flyer. This is provided by the LA County Office of Violence Prevention, which has taken on quite a bit of work and presented and created some great educational materials about GVROs. So after this presentation, I don't expect you to remember every single word I've said. The flyer provides some really useful links to OVP's web pages. They are actually also in the process of hiring 2 system navigators to assist members of the public in filing GVROs. But I'll provide some statistics that I think are very important to keep in mind. In the first 4 months of 2023, there were 200 mass shootings in the United States, including this one in Monterey Park. In 2022, 663 LA County residents died by homicide, and 510 of those deaths involved a firearm. Another 313 lives were lost due to gun suicides. So GVROs are a very useful tool to prevent gun violence because gun violence is often predictable and preventable. And it's tied to the firearm itself. There are, as I said before, warning signs. Sometimes we may know someone who, or come into contact with someone who may be at risk of hurting themselves or others with a gun. You might hear someone talking about harming someone else. You might hear about them planning a mass shooting, getting revenge, making threats, harming many people, and you know or suspect that they have a gun, or you want to make sure that they don't have the ability to get a gun. Or you have a loved one who is going through a difficult time and expressing thoughts of self-harm. 90% of suicide attempts with a gun are fatal, and only 4% of suicide attempts not involving a gun are fatal. So again, this is not necessarily a tool for, the bad guy planning the mass shooting. This is something that can protect your friends, your family, your loved ones, your community members.
好，我们说一些数据。那在2023年的前4个月，美国发生了200起大规模的枪击事件，其中也包括我们在蒙特利公园市所发生的这起枪击事件。在2022年1年里面，只有663名的洛杉矶县的居民呢死于他杀，其中呢510人呢死亡是涉及到枪支的，还有呢313人呢因持枪自杀而丧生。所以呢，我们说的这个枪械的禁制令呢，是预防枪支暴力的有用工具，因为枪支暴力呢，通常是可预知、可预防的，因为它提供某种的警告的信号。有时我们可能认识某人，接触到可能用枪伤害自己、会他人或者他人，你也可能听到有人谈论要伤害他人，或者说要报复他人等等。所以呢，你可能知道或者怀疑他们有枪。那在这时间里面呢，您就可以使用这个枪械暴力的禁制令申请，去减缓或者说减低这个持枪产生凶杀案的风险。所以呢，在90%的持枪自杀企图自杀里面呢，90%呢是致命的，而只有4%的不持枪的自杀呢是致命的。
Again, now GVROs will only take away guns and ammunition and access to guns and ammunition. It'll prevent a person from purchasing a gun. However, please note that a GVRO does not order someone to stay away from a person or a place. That is a different kind of restraining order. So GVROs relate to guns only. So I think now is a good time to dive into the nuts and bolts of the filing process, and I'm going to hand this over to Amanda.
好，那接下来呢，我们要有请 Amanda 律师呢去谈论一下如何具体的操作去申请这个枪械暴力的禁制令。
Hi, good evening. I'm Amanda Wong, and I am from the Los Angeles City Attorney's Office. My role is I work in the Office of Public Safety General Counsel. That's counsel for LAPD. And my primary role is to represent the Los Angeles Police Department in petitioning for gun violence restraining orders against people who pose a risk of harm to themselves or others. So this is primarily what I do. Like Lana, I do have to give a little disclaimer that these are my personal views. They don't represent the viewpoint of the Los Angeles City Attorney or the Los Angeles Police Department. And of course, nothing that I say constitutes legal advice. You should always consult with your own lawyer.
好，那黄律师呢，他先自我介绍，他是洛杉矶市检察官办公室这个公共安全总法律顾问部的副市检察官，他主要是 负责这个枪支起诉科的这个检察官，在那里呢，他曾经接受过这方面的专业的培训，以及是有关法律的制定方面的这个咨询。那今天呢，他首先为我们的这个讲座呢做一个免责声明，就是本讲座呢只是作为一个针对广大听众的一个讲座，它并非建立一个律师和客户之间的关系。所以呢，如果你们大家有任何法律问题的话呢，需要咨询专业的律师，就因个案呢进行详细的咨询。
So like Lana mentioned, there are different groups of people who can petition, that is to ask a judge for a gun violence restraining order. The first is law enforcement. Law enforcement can always petition for a gun violence restraining order, and they may learn about it when you call 911 or if you go into the police station. The police can consider that, and they can make a decision to petition because they think that the person that you're worried about in your life is not safe.
那谁可以提出这个枪支的禁制令呢？其中第一类人呢，就是警察或者执法人员。当然，他们有权利这样做。那他们如果在这个警察局里面接到报案的话，如果有人觉得他的身边的人有可能持枪，或者说持枪有这个作案的动机，会伤及其他人的话呢，他们可以到警察局报案，然后呢，由警察呢去帮助申请这样一个枪支暴力的禁制令。
Certain members of the community can also petition for gun violence restraining orders if you have a specific relationship with the person who poses the risk of harm. So those would be family members, household members, if you are in a dating relationship with a subject, if you share a child in common. Employers or co-workers can also petition for a gun violence restraining order, as can school employees or teachers of post-secondary schools.
除此以外呢，除了警察可以申请这个枪支的禁制令以外呢，在社区里面某些和这个可疑人物或者说持枪作案的人有这个关系的某些人呢，都可以提出这个枪械的禁制令，当中包括有家人和他住在一起的人，他的伴侣、他的雇主或者他的同事，以及是特别是在学校、高中、大学的话呢，校方工作人员以及是他的同学都可以有这个资格呢提出这个禁制令。
So who can be restrained with a gun violence restraining order? We are looking at people in our lives who we believe pose a risk of harm either to themselves or others if they are able to have access to firearms. So that may be firearms that they have currently or firearms that they may purchase or receive from other people or have access to.
那谁可以需要被这个禁制令所约束呢？这个所有透过保管、控制、拥有、购买或者接收，或者试图购买或接收枪支弹药对自己或他人造成身体伤害的主体，这些人呢，就是有理由相信他们是构成直接或者现实的危险风险的，以及是他们可能在不久的将来构成严重的危险风险的人。
And when we look at the risk that they pose, it can either be that they pose an immediate and present risk of harm, or the GVRO law also allows us to obtain a gun violence restraining order if they pose a significant risk in the near future.
所以呢，有两种情况，如果它是直接构成现实的危险风险的，这种是第一种情况。第二种情况呢，可能在不久的将来构成重大的风险危险的，这样是第二种情况。
The gun violence restraining order law is something that allows us to remove firearms from a situation when we don't have any other good alternatives to prevent the gun violence. For example, people may be exhibiting very violent or risky behavior, but it's not to the level where the police can arrest them. Or maybe they're exhibiting signs of mental illness, but it's not to the point where we are able to involuntarily commit them to a hospital for evaluation. Or maybe as family, you have tried to get them to consent to turn over the guns because you're worried about what type of a risk they pose, and they won't give up the guns. So those are some sorts of scenarios where you don't have other good alternatives, and the gun violence restraining order is like, it's a law of last resort to get the gun out of the situation and try and cool the situation down.
那这是一个非常有效的工具，因为它可能是在没有其他更好的选择情况下呢，它能够预防制止枪击案的发生。因为有的时候他家人可能意识到他有这样的倾向，但是医院呢却没有出示相关的证明。但是对持枪来说呢，他有自杀的倾向，在这种情况下呢，就是保护他自己，也是家人的话呢，也可以通过这种方式呢，保护他的家人，以及是预防枪击案的产生。
Some of the subjects or the people who pose a risk or the situations we encounter are where somebody expresses suicidal ideations. We have a lot of people who are suffering from mental health crises. Maybe they're off their medications. Maybe they have a mental health condition that is escalating out of control. We deal with people with post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Sometimes people have been in an accident and they've got a brain injury. Or it may be an elderly person suffering from dementia and losing their mental capacity. So these are not always violent and deadly criminal type people. It can be very normal people dealing with some very difficult situations. We also use gun violence restraining orders to address violent or angry individuals, people who are committing road rage, people who have a personal grudge or animosity towards workplace or school, people who target somebody else because of race, religion, gender, or domestic violence situations also.
因为在这个枪械的使用过程中呢，像是持枪的人，如果他有这个智力方面、精神方面的疾病的话，像是这个创伤后遗症 （PTSD）， 也许他或者是脑部受过伤害，他也许会有失智症等等这种情况下，他持枪是相当危险的。所以呢，家人可以通过这种禁制令呢，保护自身以及是他这个家人的安全。除此以外呢，针对一些有暴力倾向的人，他们可能很容易暴怒。或者说在马路上开车也很容易生气的话呢，这种也是处于威胁到整个社区的安全。那在这种情况下呢，这个禁制令是非常有用的。
So when can a person go to law enforcement to ask for help in obtaining a gun violence restraining order? The answer is always. If it is an emergency situation, please call 911. And have law enforcement respond, and they can obtain a gun violence restraining order immediately. Even if it's not an emergency, but you are concerned, perhaps a family member is getting out of control or making some comments that make you nervous, you can go in and talk to the police, and the police can help you obtain a gun violence restraining order also.
什么时候可以申请这个枪械的禁制令呢？其实回答是什么时候都可以，因为如果你觉得有这个存在的危险的话呢，您可以直接就打911报警，然后呢，通过警察去帮助您申请这个枪械的禁制令。那如果是非紧急的情况下的话呢，您也可以就是到警察局去报案，然后通过警察的协助呢，去协助您申请这个禁制令，也是可以的。
So LAPD has 22 stations throughout the city, and every single station has a designated gun violence restraining order liaison officer, and every single station has received training. And Lana, on behalf of Lana also, the LA County Sheriff's Department has 24 patrol stations, and every station has a deputy who serves as a gun violence restraining order liaison and knows how to petition for a GVRO. In this area, most importantly, the Sheriff Department Temple Station in Temple City serves Temple City, North San Gabriel, East Pasadena, and South San Gabriel.
在 洛杉矶的县呢，一共有22个警察局，他们每个警察局都有一位的GVRO 的联络员，他们是受过训练，并且呢知道如何去申请相关的这个枪械的禁制令。所以如果你们有这个必要的话呢，可以到警察局呢去求助，会有专员呢协助你们去申请这个禁制令。
So I just want to talk briefly about, you may be asking whether you as an individual should petition for a gun violence restraining order or whether you should ask law enforcement to petition for you. There are certain advantages to having law enforcement petition for the gun violence restraining order. First of all, law enforcement officers have been trained, so they know how to do the petition. They have the advantage of having attorneys like Lana and myself to help them. They know how to file the papers, and they know how to serve the papers. When law enforcement petitions, it is law enforcement's name that goes on the paperwork that's filed with the court. So your name as an individual is not on those papers. And then most importantly, when law enforcement petitions, they can, when they serve the subject, they can ask for the guns to be surrendered immediately.
那在申请这个枪械的禁制令的时候呢，有2种选择。第一种呢是通过这个执法的部门申请这个枪械的禁制令，其中的优势呢就是这些帮助您的这些工作人员呢，他们是在受过正规的培训，他们知道如何送达文件，并且向法院呢提交这个送达的证明。他们的申请人就是您的名字呢，也不会作为请求出现在枪械禁制令的文件上，他们可以马上要求这个对象呢立即交出枪支和弹药，并且呢将这些枪支和弹药呢进行妥善的保管。
I just wanted to jump in since we're moderating ourselves. Judge Hansel, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but since you hear many of these petitions, do you have an opinion on law enforcement filed petitions versus petitions filed by the public, or have you been seeing many petitions filed by the public?
So far, most of the petitions have been filed by law enforcement. You could imagine scenarios where an individual might choose to file one. By way of example, you can file at the same time, you can file a domestic violence restraining order, or a request for a civil harassment restraining order or workplace violence restraining order, also, which law enforcement typically do not file. And so there may be reasons strategically where you would decide as an individual that you want to file. But most of them so far really have been ones by law enforcement.
Now, some people may choose to file them by themselves, and that is because they may choose to not want law enforcement to be so involved. So if you petition for a gun violence restraining order yourself, your name will be on it, and you will go into court as the petitioner and testify.
那在像申请这个枪械的禁制令的，如果是自己申请的话，不通过这个执法部门申请备案的话呢，有一个缺点，那就是他这个名字呢，就是申请的名字呢，会在这个档案里面显示，但是呢，在提交这个档案部门执法部门的档案的时候呢，您不会被这个主体呢纳入司法系统里面。
It's important to note, again, that gun violence restraining orders are civil restraining orders. So if you're concerned about a family member committing potential violence, you can use this civil tool to disarm them and perhaps prevent something from rising to the level of criminal.
再说一次呢，这个枪械禁制令的申请呢是民事诉讼的其中一个部分，所以呢，您可以通过这个程序呢去避免产生刑事案件的下一个环节，所以呢，这是一个非常有效的工具。
All right, so let's get into the nuts and bolts. I'm just going to go over this briefly so that you have an idea of the process of obtaining a gun violence restraining order. So first of all, gun violence restraining orders are heard in LA County Superior Court family law courthouses.
接下来呢，我们跟大家详细说明一下这些表格怎么填写，或者说具体的这个禁制令呢如何申请。那简而言之呢，他们是通过这个民事法庭会去进行开始申请的步骤的。
You can file for a gun violence restraining order in any family court, but the hearings right now take place, I believe, in only 4 courts in LA County.
您可以在民事法庭申请这个枪械的禁制令，但是据我所知呢，目前来说，在 LA County 呢，只有4个法庭呢接受有关的这个聆讯会或者是听证会。
One really good resource for self-help and instructions on gun violence restraining orders is the California Court website. If you Google California Court gun violence restraining order, you will get to this California Court website.
其中一个非常有用的工具，能够帮助您学习如何去申请有关这个枪械禁制令呢，是一个网站。只要在这里输入这个屏幕上面所显示的这个网址的话呢 ，California Court Gun Violence Restraining Order， 你搜索这个关键字呢，它就会弹出这样一个网站，供大家去进行咨询和登录。
It takes you step by step through the process and also contains links to the forms you need.
那当中呢，它可以提供一步一步的告诉您怎么去申请这个枪械的禁制令，而且呢，它还有一些表格一些表格呢相关的信息呢提供给大家。
These are the forms that you need to petition for a gun violence restraining order. Again, they are all available on the California Court website. And in the Los Angeles Superior Court specifically, you can go to the Family Law Department, and if you're not very good on the computer, they will give you a packet of forms in paper form that you can use.
那大家屏幕上面所看到的这些表格呢，就是所有跟这个枪械禁制令相关的一些表格。那如果大家不清楚的话呢，你也可以直接到这个民事法庭里面去这个洛杉矶的民事法庭呢，他们有专门的这个列表一些清晰的表单呢，告诉大家应该填写哪些表格。
I'm going to talk about the petition a little bit in depth because that is the most important document, the GV100, the actual petition where you're asking the court for the gun violence restraining order, and then there are some other associated documents.
以下呢，我会重点谈一下这个 GV-100的这个表格，因为呢，它是申请枪械禁制令的最基本的表格。完了以后呢，我还会跟大家分享一下其他相关的一些不那么重要的表格。
I also want to note that these forms are only available right now in English and Spanish. The court website does suggest that they're available in Chinese, Korean, and Vietnamese, but they're not. I checked. We're working on that.
那想跟大家说明一下呢，就是这些表格呢，现在呢可提供的语言版本呢只有英文跟西班牙文有一些他们说会有中文的表格，但是其实呢在网站上面呢是找不到的。那我们正在呢努力为大家提供一个中文的表格。
So the first part of the petition in the green box is your name or law enforcement's name as the petitioner. Who is asking for the gun violence restraining order, and what is your relationship to the person who is being restrained?
那大家可以看到表格上面左边的表格里面呢那个绿色的框框，那个呢就是填写谁申请就是这一个保护或者是禁制令的，通常呢是填写你的名字或者是这一个执法部门的名字。
The second part, the orange box, you put the person who you want to restrain from being able to have firearms, their name, date of birth, and information.
那在左边的表格的底部呢，有一个橘色的那个框框，在那一部分呢，就是填写你想谁被禁止这个枪支的，谁获得这个枪支的禁制令这个人的名字，还有他的出生年月日这些基本的信息。
The third part in yellow is where you're filing it, and you will be filing it in the county where the subject lives.
然后呢，你可以看到右手边的表格的上面，然后呢是一个也是黄色的框框，那边呢就是填写你申请的那个法院的位置那个地址，然后通常呢是你那个人所在的那个县的法院。
The fourth part in blue is any other court cases that the subject may have. These may be criminal cases or family law cases, civil cases. It all can be relevant.
然后呢，蓝色中间那个表格右手边蓝色部分的话呢，就是填写这一个对象的他所牵涉到的一些其他的案件，无论是民事案件或家庭法案件，或者是其他的案件呢，你都可以填写上去。
The box in the red is very important, and this is where you list any information that you have about any firearms that the subject has. Do the best you can to list out the firearms that you believe that they have access to or possess. Any information is helpful.
那下面红色的框框呢，就是非常重要、非常重要的，就是那个对象他可以接触或者是他拥有的枪支的具体的详细的信息。那尽你所能把这些信息呢提供出来，这对我们的这个禁制令的申请还有批准呢是非常有帮助的。
Bear in mind that law enforcement only knows about guns that are registered, but many people have guns that for one reason or another are not registered. So any information that you can provide about the firearms helps keep the community and law enforcement safe.
那想提醒一下大家，就是执法部门呢，他们所能查到、追踪到的枪支的信息呢，是那些已经登记在案的枪支。那可能因为某些原因，有些人他拥有一个枪支，但是呢，他们没有登记，那执法部门呢是没有这方面的信息的。所以，如果你有这相关的信息的话呢，请尽量的提供。
The next box in green is where you have to explain to the court why this person poses a risk of harm from firearms violence. And you have to explain to the court why you think a gun violence restraining order is necessary to help prevent that harm.
那大家看到左手边的表格的第一个部分呢是绿色的部分这个部分呢你是要详细的填写一下，向这个法官或者是法庭提供一个详细的解释，说为什么这个人应该被收到这一个枪支的禁制令，为什么这个枪支禁制令呢是有必要的，是需要的。
The orange box is where you tell the judge how long you would like the gun violence restraining order to last. The judge can issue it for up to 5 years.
那下面橘色框框的那边呢，就是你要告诉这个法官，你希望这个禁制令的时长是多少？因为法官呢可以发出的禁制令最长的时间段呢是5年。
There is no fee to file for a gun violence restraining order or to have the sheriff serve it.
那在这个屏幕上右手边呢，上面那个绿色的框框，那就写着你填写或申请这个枪支禁制令呢是不需要费用的。
And then once you petition for the gun violence restraining order, the court will set a hearing where you go and talk to the judge and explain to them why you want the gun violence restraining order. That hearing will be set within 21 days. If you want a temporary gun violence restraining order issued immediately to protect you for the 21 days up to the hearing, you have to check that box, the blue box, and request a temporary restraining order.
然后呢，下面呢就是说，通常你提交了这一个枪支禁制令的申请表之后呢，法官呢或法庭呢会安排这一个听证会。然后呢，让法官呢听取你这一个申请禁制令的理由。那这一个听证会呢，通常是在你提交这个表格的21天之内开的。那如果在你提交表格的时候到这个听证会中间这个时间段，如果你想申请一个临时禁制令的话呢，那请勾选那个表格上面的那一项，就是蓝色的那一项。
There is another separate form you have to fill out to request a temporary gun violence restraining order that will last for 21 days.
然后呢，这个就是刚才说到这个临时的枪支禁制令，这是需要呢另外申请的填写的。
There is another form you have to fill out briefly. It is a notice of court hearing. When the court grants sets your petition for hearing, they will also fill out a notice of court hearing. It will have the date of the hearing on it, and then it will be your responsibility as the petitioner to make sure that the subject is personally served with notice. That allows them, that ensures that they have proper notice of the hearing and are able to turn up in court and present their side of the case.
然后呢，下面大家看到这一个是另外一个你需要呢简单填写的表格，就是这一个开庭日期，应该是听证会的日期的这么一个通知。因为作为申请人或者是申请人，你需要呢，就是这是你的责任，来去把这一个开庭的通知呢送达到这个对象手中的。如果呢这一个对象呢是没有收到这个通知的话呢，法庭呢是不会开庭的。
So personal service must take place at least 5 calendar days before the hearing, and if you are not able to get them served, the hearing will not take place. You can ask for a continuance to try and serve them, but it will not take place that day.
正如刚才所说呀，就是必须要在开庭5天之前以上的时间内呢，把这一个开庭的通知呢送达到这个应诉人或者是对象的手中。那正如刚才所说，如果你不在这个期限内送到这个对象手中的话呢，是不会开庭的。你也可以呢申请这个延期。
There's also another form called a klets. This is not part of the court file. It is all the information about the subject, identifying information, so that when they become a restrained person, they go on a special database that law enforcement is able to access that information about them.
然后呢，大家看到这一个就是表格的话呢，叫 clicks。然后这个呢是在那个系统上面可能找不到，但是呢，如果呢你想要填写后的话呢，这个对象或应诉人的他的信息呢会进入到我们执法部门的一个数据库当中。那执法部门呢就会有这个对象或者是应诉人的他的这些资料。
And there may be a few other documents. In LA Superior Court, there's a family law cover sheet. So that's just a cover sheet that you do with information about the case just to open a case in court.
那还有其他的那些其他的一些表格，还有文件，譬如说是洛杉矶县高等法院的这一些就是家事法的封面，就是这一些封面或者是叫做这一个就是封面，然后呢，或者是还有其他的一些表格，可能呢需要呢你可以使用的。
Okay, and just to sum up, resources that are available to members of the public. The California Court website is terrific. The LA Superior Court, you can go into their restraining order center. They have self-help people who are able to help you fill out forms. The LA County Office of Violence Prevention that Lana mentioned, and then you can always turn to your law enforcement agencies.
那想总结一下呢，有很多非常有用的这些资源或资讯或者是网站，那是以供大家呢就参考。比如说我们的洛杉矶的高等法院，还有呢我们加州的法院的那个网站，还有呢我们洛杉矶县的这个防止暴力的办公室，或呢是当地的一些执法部门的网站。
I'm Judge Dean Hansel. I am in the Family Law Department. To keep us on schedule, because I know that we're due to adjourn at 6:30, I'm not going to get much into the mechanics, just talking about a couple other strategic issues in connection with this. One is this. As you're preparing to go to court, are you planning on relying on any documentation? And documentation can be emails, text messages, photographs, videotapes. If so, organize them in advance. Make sure you've got a copy for the other side. Make sure you've got a copy for the judge. Number them, starting with number 1. If any of the documents are in a foreign language, you need to translate it into English with a certified translator. If it's a video, you need to have a copy of a transcript, again, done by certified court reporter that's doing that. When you walk into court, hand the exhibits to the other side, hand the set to the clerk. A second issue is will you need an interpreter? If it is Spanish, we have them and we can get them very quickly. If it's not Spanish, if it's Mandarin or Cantonese, by way of example, we have less. Far better to inform the court clerk in advance that you're going to need an interpreter, and it can be an interpreter for you or any of your witnesses. Then when you check in, remind them of that fact also.
刚才 Hansel 法官呢跟大家介绍了，就是在听证会举行之前呢，希望大家要把这个听证会需要的文件和证据呢都要准备齐全，当中包括您觉得重要的这些证据，像是录音、录像、一些文件、邮件等等。如果是中文的话呢，必须要把它们翻译成英语，而且是由这个法庭认证的翻译呢进行翻译。除此以外呢，把它们编上号码，井井有条的准备好。然后第二点呢，要注意的是，您在跟这个书记员递交这个材料的时候呢，还要提醒他，就是你需要翻译，或者说预先呢要准备好安排口译员，是需要法庭认证的口译员，因为呢，西班牙语的翻译呢相对比较多一点，但是在法庭上面中文的口译员呢数量有限，所以呢需要提前准备。
When you go to court, there are going to be 4 things on the judge's mind. The 2 threshold issues are, number 1, are you a person who is entitled to bring a gun violence restraining order? Amanda went through the list. I won't repeat it. But so, for example, a neighbor down the street is not on that list, cannot bring a gun violence restraining order. That's one issue. A second one, again, was already referenced. Has the other side been served? If you haven't been able to do so, then you should consider asking for additional time and explain the difficulties that you've had. Typically, especially if it's the first time, the judge will grant your request. On a substantive level, then the judge will look, does your evidence meet the required standard? And that is, does the defendant pose a significant danger in the near future of personal injury to themselves or another person from access to firearms? So what does that mean? First of all, significant danger in the near future. That does not mean if you're worried at some indefinite time down the road, something bad might happen. That's not going to be sufficient. It has to be a danger from access to firearms. So if there's been a threat, they're going to use a knife, they're going to beat you up, that sort of thing. It may be, as I'd mentioned, domestic violence restraining orders, civil harassment restraining orders might suffice, but not gun violence restraining orders.
好，那在举行听证会的时候呢，法官他会针对这个情况呢，做出4个标准方面的评判。第一个标准呢，就是首先您有没有这样的一个资格去提出这样一个枪械的限制令。那如果刚才正如 Amanda 律师所介绍的，可能是家人、学校的员工或者说熟悉的人才会有这样的资格。如果你是这个他的邻居或者说街道上的行人的话呢，可能就没有这个资格去这样做了。其次呢，就是这个枪械的禁制令呢，有没有能够合理的送达，有没有在期限之内呢送达到这个对象手上？如果没有的话呢，您需要更长的时间呢，法官可能会要求你呢再进行不断的尝试。那第三呢，就是证据方面的这个说服力，就是到底他有没有这样一个达到一个危急的标准，也就是说有没有理由相信它是构成直接而且现实的一个危险的风险，或者是在不久的将来构成重大的危险的风险。所以呢，这是法官判案或者说进行这个聆讯会上作为一个重要的标准的审核。
And then the issue is a significant danger or threat to whom? Here the law is broad. It can be a threat to themselves, such as threatening suicide. It can be a threat to you, the person that's bringing the petition, or it could be a threat to somebody else. And here, it could be a threat to a neighbor. So the law interprets that in a fairly broad way. One other thing to note about this is that it's a higher legal standard than a domestic violence restraining order. Domestic violence restraining order is simply a preponderance of the evidence. What does that mean? 51%, more likely than not. Here, the standard is higher. It's clear and convincing evidence, and that means it's a high probability. It's substantially more likely to be true than not. So again, thinking about this strategically, you could bring a domestic violence restraining order with the lower standard at the same time you're bringing your gun violence restraining order.
大家要注意了，在这个枪械禁制令的审核呢，它的这个标准呢，比起我们所说的这个普通的家暴的这个家庭禁制令的标准呢，需要更高。因为在这个普通的家庭暴力的禁制令呢，它可能只需要做这个叫做证据优势原则，只要超过51%就可以了。但是在这个枪械禁制令呢，它需要更高的叫做清晰明确的这种证据的说服力。那这个标准呢，比起刚才所说的是需要更高的这个说服力，或者说更高的举证要求，才能够达到这个禁制令颁发的标准。
The fourth thing that's on the judge's mind is in the standard also is you have to establish that less restrictive alternatives are inadequate. Normally, that's a fairly easy standard to meet, and that is, are the alternatives inadequate, inappropriate, or ineffective? They're just not going to work. Have you tried already to talk the person down with that? It's just be aware of that. And then the final comment I'm going to make is this. As you're preparing for it, organize your presentation in advance. And how many things do you want to say? And what I would do, let's say it's 5 things, I would start out and say, Your Honor, there are 5 points I want to make. And then go through them, number 1, number 2. You're giving the judge a roadmap, and all of a sudden, you've used the number 5. The judge is thinking number 5. Let's start with your most important point. That's number 1, etc. to go through it. You want to make it easy for the judge.
在最后呢，就是在您向法官进行陈述的过程中呢，你必须要有一个清晰的一个轮廓、一个次序。假比说你有5点重点呢是需要向法官陈述的，您必须要理清他们1、2、3、4、5这样清晰的陈述出来。每一个点呢都要说到点上，也不要太长、太臃肿，但是要清晰到位。这样的话呢，以便法官能够清晰的接到您的所传达的信息明白您的这个需求所在。
Last comment, if you have witnesses, make sure they are disciplined also with that, and that they are well organized, and if they're going to use exhibits, same rule in connection. They're really your exhibits. You're the one bringing them, but you just want to make sure that in connection with that, that you do the same with your witnesses, and don't have witnesses that don't have any firsthand knowledge. Don't have a witness that says, oh, the petitioner is a very honest person. That's not very useful to the judge.
除此以外呢，大家如果有证人陪同你一起出席听证会的话呢，你也要确保证人呢跟您一样，就是他们所提供的证词毕竟是可以有说服力的，而且是这个正确的，或者是能够有达到一个举证的标准。所以呢，如果没有证人的话也不要紧，但是有证人的话呢，最好能够让他们确认，能够在出庭的时候呢，能够为您提供有力的证据。
Lana, Amanda, and I could go on all night. You don't have all night. We want to thank you for being such a receptive audience, and also thank you so much for taking the time to come out this evening. And with that, that concludes our presentation.
那我们今天呢，就到此为止了，谢谢各位。
I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight. I hope you learned something new that you could share with your family and friends. I want to thank our panelists, the Honorable Dean Hansel, Lana Choi, and Amanda Wong. Thank you so much. I thank you to our interpreters. Thank you to the city, Monterey Park, City Council, and everyone for being here today.
那非常感谢今天出席会议的在座各位，然后呢也感谢呢我们3位在台上的嘉宾，感谢他们的时间为我们呢就是介绍那么多有用的信息。那希望呢大家呢可以学到一点新的东西。
Thank you very much. You have a good evening.
那
Once again, this will be available online and videotaped. And visit our city for more information. Thank you.